Webinale IPC 2017 in Berlin. Mein Name ist Christoph Ebert. Ich freue mich sehr, dass die Val Head bei mir ist. Hi Val.
Hi.
Val ist Web-Animation Expert und hat eben die Keynote hier gehalten auf der Webinale IPC, die Eröffnungskeynote. Sie ist Autorin des Buchs Designing Interface Animation. Sie lehrt CSS Animation auf lynda.com. Sie macht einen Podcast, Motion and Meaning, und macht Workshops und noch vieles mehr rund um Web-Animationen. Und genau das wird auch das Thema jetzt sein. Und wir machen auf Englisch weiter. Hi Val.
Hi.
To start off, what's your opinion? Well, you're of the opinion that people should use more animation in their work. What's your, what's the kind of animation that you prefer? What's your ideal form of animation?
Right. I mean, I guess a lot of it is I don't want people to be afraid to use animation. A lot of times, I think especially with the way the web has been with flash things and banners, everyone's kind of like, oh, animation is not a thing we do. But with the way web animation technology has advanced so much in recent years, I think it's something we should turn to as an option. Not that everything has to be animated, but I think most projects could benefit from at least thinking about it. Having, instead of just being like, we don't use that, have a reason why you might not, or look into how it could help your project. Because there's a lot of room where animation can really, help support the UX and experience of a product, maybe in a way that our other design tools like type and color couldn't do as well. Animation is a great option for getting things across sometimes. And I think all too often we just ignore it when maybe we should just, investigate it a little. We could come up with some really interesting solutions.
And give it a shot.
Yeah.
You already mentioned meaning. The focus of your keynote was combining purpose and style in animation.
Yeah.
And I'd simply like to go through some of the most interesting points that you mentioned. How do you finding that purpose in animation? One very interesting thing was connecting context in animation. What kind of examples do you see here, and what's the goal behind connecting context?
Oh yeah, that's I think a really big one that animation can help with, and especially in this time where we have so many different screen sizes we're designing for. So often we can't fit the entire interface on a screen. We have things off screen, we have some things layered behind other things, and by visibly showing those transitions of a thing coming forward from behind or coming onto screen from off screen, we show that connection of where it was and where it's going, and that means that the person using our product doesn't have to think about oh, where did that menu come from, because they saw it come into view, and then that establishes this whole kind of landscape of where the interface is. And it's tough to do that without motion sometimes.
Yeah. Two aspects that I found to be of course animation is always visually centered, but I found the aspect of visual continuity and also the aspect of hinting and affordances to be something that can provide navigation and guidance for the user. Please elaborate on those aspects a little bit.
Those, especially the things like visual continuity, is really about just avoiding those questions of where did that thing go? Why did it come back? Having things stay on screen. A lot of the time when we change screens, we just move everything off screen, fade to black, move everything back on. What if we tried to if there's an icon that's on screen the whole time? A lot of the time this happens with avatars when you're switching between a list view to a detail view of one item or one person. That person's photo might be on screen for both the list and the individual account. Why not leave it on screen, have it move position or however it would move, as opposed to taking it off just to bring it back on again? And I think that's a thing that we don't do very often on the web. We kind of are always take it all away, bring it all back.
Okay. And of course, animation, people might think as the aspect on the forefront is directing attention or getting attention from the user.
Yeah.
What would you say is the perfect way to do this and work it into your work?
I think that the best way to do it is to think of the thing that's most important to your users at that particular time. It might be, I think one of the examples I used in my talk was Fitbit, where the most important thing to you when you log into their site is how many steps have I taken? Did I do enough steps? Do I win any awards today for my steps? Pairing up animation with the thing that's most important to them can be a really great way to help them, direct their attention to that thing and just make things feel easier for them because they didn't have to look for that thing they wanted. They were just like, oh, it's right there. And there's there are a lot of cases like that where if it's a thing people are that's very important to them or that they're most looking for, we can help bring it to the forefront with motion.
And Fitbit is doing this by simply having those icons, I think, and the stats that have changed.
Yeah.
Basically shaking.
They do it. Yeah, they do it really simply. Where like the only thing that really animate is like the bars for your data of like, here's how many steps you took, here's how many miles you went, and you get all your numbers there, and that's the only thing that's animated, and conveniently also the thing you care about the most. It's a good pairing.
And since we're at also a web conference here, performance is a very interesting aspect. One aspect that you wouldn't think of in the first place maybe, but what's the story behind performance and animation?
It's kind of I guess a long story, or it covers a lot of ground. Like in some cases, it might not affect performance at all. If you have if you're using especially very CSS-centric things, you're probably already using CSS. You probably don't have to load any extra CSS, or if you do, it might be like negligible few extra lines. And CSS can also be very performant if you use the properties that browsers can really animate well, like things like any of the transforms and opacity. You can get really performant animation that way. You can even get really performant animation with JavaScript too. The line isn't really on the language, it's really kind of more how you design things. If you are moving, like let's say 200 things at the same time, probably not so great. But if there's a lot of the things with animation and performance can just kind of be about being smart about which properties you're animating, how many things you're animating at once. And then it can get a little more complicated in things like some lower powered mobile devices may have trouble dealing with even the most performant animations. And in that case, you might have to do a little more work to kind of navigate that situation. But it's, in a lot of cases, animation, I feel like we think it could be really performance heavy or that it will be, but if you're really smart about which properties you animate, it actually could be have very little impact at all, which I think is kind of neat. It's like it's this powerful thing that sometimes can make things seem more performant even if they're not.
Something that's usually at first not, people might think a UX concern, but you think it is storytelling and messaging. What's the story behind it?
Well, I think it's, to make, when things are easy to use, there's some sort of like common thread throughout everything, right? Like the way it's designed, the way it feels to use, there's like a focus. And I think when we, a lot of the time we push that onto visual design and are like, oh, UX doesn't care about that. But I think it's really important to have those things match up. Like if everyone's agrees on what the most important things are, you can design the UX of a product to like focus on that one thing. You can create, let's say like your story is that you want to be friendly and playful. You can do that through like copy and content. You can do that through the design. You can do that through motion too. I think having those overarching goals that everything feeds into can just, makes the difference between a product that's like, you're like, wow, that was really great. Like when you have everything aiming for that same goal, there's just that feeling you get of like, that was really good. I think that's, it's hard to get if you are working in your individual silos and nothing really matches up.
Okay. Apart from Microsoft's Clippy, what are other total no-goes for you in web animation?
I think definitely don't redo Clippy, except maybe for some jokes. Maybe that's okay. I think really anything that's very self-serving, like if you were doing it to show off, I think that's generally going to be a bad idea. It's probably not going to work out well. But if you're doing it, for a reason that's aimed at the user, like I want to make this easier for them to find, I want this to be easier for them to follow, or I want to give them better feedback, like that's going to get you in a good place. If you're like, we can rotate things forever in CSS and that's why we're doing it, probably not a good idea, at least if you care about your audience. Maybe some people don't.
Val, thanks a lot for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Have fun at the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.